Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mike Stud on the line. Good morning.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show, my man. How are you this morning?
I'm great. I appreciate you. Appreciate you guys having me. We've been just running around doing a bunch of promo and stuff, but I'm doing well. I'm excited.
Mike, really quick, I want to start way in the beginning, man. We're gonna start in the beginning here this morning. Let's talk about your time at Duke, an All-American ball player. Tell us about that experience and growing up and then going on to Duke and becoming an All-American ball player. What was that experience like early on?
Yeah, my whole life I was kind of pretty focused on. I knew what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? I was always a pretty serious student athlete, and things weren't almost better than I even planned when I got to Duke. I was from Rhode Island. As well as I might have played in high school, it doesn't necessarily translate to college right away. So, when I got to Duke, things really weren't my way. My freshman year is the year that I actually had all the accolades, like the All-American stuff was all my freshman year. As I look back, it's kind of feels like it was meant to be, because that was really the only year that I was healthy. I played really well and threw really well that year. I was the closer, so I pitched towards the end of the games and just kind of really caught a rhythm and had a great year that freshman year. Really honestly enjoyed my time at Duke. It's just so crazy looking back at how things had changed. The plane that I was on, and really it kind of had it all mapped out. I really thought I was well on my way to becoming a professional baseball player, and that was always kind of my focus. But right before my draft year, which is junior year, is really when I ended up blowing out. I blew out my elbow. I had a complete reconstruction on my throwing arm, on my pitching elbow. So naturally, I kind of just had some extra time, and I couldn't travel with the team while I was injured. So I started dabbling with music a little bit. I started dabbling with a very common, very basic music program that everyone has called GarageBand, and that's kind of how that's like the first program that I started even trying, just experimenting with, and then I ended up translating into making some of my first songs that got me started. I made even on that program. It's crazy to look back, seeing how amateur it was at the time, but it did the job. It did the trick for me, and I was able to get my foot in the door a little bit, with some of those first releases. And this was right before I kind of snuck in right as the ship was sailing, as far as, it was before everyone was making music and they're doing. I feel like now, because of social media and how anyone can really do anything, there's no limitations. I feel like everyone is making music in their house or in their dorm or what have you, but I kind of snuck in right before it became a little bit, before it became as oversaturated as it is now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was all just kind of it was a combination of good timing and good luck, and I really did get snuck my foot in the door, and I just really since then I've been running with it. I've been working on it and running with it. It's been about 5 years.
Well, I will say this, your story is fascinating in the fact that, like you said, you had a plan. You were going to be a professional ball player. You were going to do it. You had it in your mind that that's what you were going to do. And then all of a sudden this, injury robbed you of those dreams. But at the same time, you started, experimenting with GarageBand. Like you said, something as simple as GarageBand. And like you said, a little amateurish or whatever it might have been. But it proved that your new passion was now music. And when you went into, let's talk about that first time that you posted a song, and when you actually started seeing the views coming in, whether it was on YouTube or however people were listening to your music, what was that feeling like when you started seeing, oh my gosh, there's all these millions of views now?
Yeah, it was a weird feeling. It's like, as a lot of things have happened, things have changed, and a lot of cool experiences. I don't know if there's been that many as cool as that first, when it actually started to go a little viral. You know what I mean? And it didn't go incredibly viral. The whole progression of my career has been somewhat steady. I mean, the beginning was the biggest jump. And I went at the time when I put this song College Humor out. I mean, I had no following, I had no Twitter, I had none of those things. It wasn't like, hey, I'm gonna make this song and I'm gonna start getting fans and then this is where my career starts. It really wasn't anything like that of the sort. I mean, I made the song. I thought only my teammates would hear it. It was really more of a personal thing. You know what I mean? I didn't think, maybe even really outside of my roommates and my teammates, I didn't really foresee anyone else hearing it. So it was a strange feeling. It kind of it didn't happen overnight. It was more like a span of a few weeks where I put this song out, and it just started to the first night. It started at 1,000, 5,000, and then it really just started to jump.
Wow.
And talking 50, 100,000, 200,000 hits in the first week or so. And it was, again, I didn't really foresee any of it. I didn't really even know how it worked at the time. So it was an interesting feeling. I remember that pretty vividly because it was really like the first true time that I was completely surprised by it. I didn't really think to see those types of numbers, at that scale and at that point in my life, it was kind of it was shocking, So I remember that rush and that feeling, but it did at the same time it did inspire me to, at that time I obviously felt it was still very minimal, and even looking back on it now, it shows how it's crazy how how far we had to come to get to this point. But at the same time, I remember thinking it really inspired me to it gave me a rush, of energy and really kind of injected me with some passion right away for it, as far as, hey, people are interested in this. When you're doing something and people are interested in, it's a good feeling, it's kind of reassuring. So it was one of those moments I remember, hey, let's give this a try, And I'm glad that we did,
Yeah,
I'm glad that we taken it this far.
And you garnered over 60 million YouTube views. I mean, that's 60 million YouTube views. I mean, when this all happens, now, when's that first encounter where a fan comes up and goes, Mike Stud, Mike Stud? I mean, what happens at that first encounter where you oh, man, I'm signing autographs now? I mean, tell us about that first encounter where you started hitting, where fans started coming up to you and recognizing you in the streets.
Yeah, it was actually at school. I was obviously a baseball player, but by no means was I walking around kind of, famous for being a baseball player on campus. I wasn't really the vibe like Duke. I think some of the basketball players might get that treatment, but not the baseball players. So it was, it actually started happening at school. They started playing the song at the college bars in the area. There was a handful of bars and clubs that were affiliated to the school, and that's actually where I started to notice, on campus I would get stopped from people I wasn't necessarily friends with or acquainted with. They would say, hey, I like the song, blah blah blah, and that was actually the first, could all have kind of happened and started on campus. But it's an interesting feeling. I think my fans and my supporters, they could tell you firsthand that we're kind of a bunch of normal dudes, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
when you come up to me or us on the street, you get what you see, you know what I mean? I think you get what you expect. I'm pretty much a normal dude, and I always talk to you and say hi and take a picture, do any of those things. It's still very, still crazy.
Do you still keep up with your old teammates from Duke?
I do, yeah. I mean, one in particular is our relationship gets a ton of coverage, but it's Marcus Stroman. He's a pitcher for the Blue Jays. But he was a ton. He came to Duke. I would think I was a junior, and I'd just been injured when he got there, and we've been best friends, ever since. So he's obviously having a lot of success. So that relationship gets the most coverage. That's really who I'm closest with from Duke. But I had a group of 3 or 4 guys that I was extremely close with in my class that they still shoot me texts, and we go back and forth, kind of joking how you know, because they're following my career and they find it so. They know they know how crazy it is. You know, those teammates that I had at Duke are the kind of the ones that saw firsthand how much of a long shot this all is. So, you know, I'll get texts from those guys kind of poking fun or you know, just checking up, but just kind of reminded me how crazy, you know, this has all become, you know, and those guys are perfect reminders of, again, to not take myself too seriously and to remember how this all started, you know, but it happened all at Duke, you know, and those teammates, you can't really replace those guys because they were really there. Only guys that were really there from the beginning before we even thought it would be anything.
That is awesome. We've had some great success in music, and I will tell you this. This is Mike Stud, which premieres first on the Esquire Network, 10 p.m. Pacific and Eastern Time. You're going to get a chance to get more in-depth with Mike Stud. Tell us, for our listeners listening out there, what can they expect from this new series called This is Mike Stud?
Yeah, you know, as much as it is, it sounds like it's very much about me and our artist Mike Stud, but it really isn't. You know, it circles around, you know, my trajectory as an artist and like how we've gotten here. But it lives on the road, and it lives in these funny, you know, it lives in this world that we live in. We call it a bubble. You know, it feels like a bubble. You get on the bus. You wake up, and every city you kind of do the same thing. You wake up, you do the meet and greet, you do press, but you meet in that same 24 hours. You know, you might do the same things, but you go through you meet so many different people. There's so many different experiences. I think tour life is it's kind of fascinating in itself, but I think what this show kind of lives on is this cast of dudes the friends that I have. You know, they're my employees, but they're also my best friends, TV show or not. You know, these are the guys that I live with and work with, and I think that's why this show is happening. You know what I mean? Like, I think people, you know, what I love about the show is the name, especially as This is Mike Stud, is that I think most people are asking, who's Mike Stud? You know what I mean? So the name I love, because This is Mike Stud, and it's really kind of, again, it lives on the shoulders of we have a funny cast of dudes. Like, they're really the dynamics and relationships that we have, I think, are really what fuel the storylines of the show and the feelings of the show. And again, you don't really have to be a fan of me. You don't even have to be a fan of music, really. Like, in the sense, I don't really know if anyone's not a fan of music in general, but even just a fan of this type of music, you know, it's really not about that. It circles around it, but it lives around it. But again, it's about the friendships, and the experiences that we go through they're kind of wild. You know what I mean? But again, we're also, we have a very kind of normal feeling to us, and I think the normalcy of how we handle things and kind of the extreme situations that tour life and being an up-and-coming musician, all of those kind of stir. You throw them into a melting pot, and it kind of it's just a very interesting show. You know what I mean? We keep it's weirdly informative. You know, we're kind of telling you how we're basically walking you how to tour and do it independently and all the decisions we have to make. But it really does, you know, I think it really is the backbone of the show is the different characters. Sometimes it feels scripted. You know, it's obviously unscripted, and it's docu-esque. It's very run and done, and it's pick up your camera and go. A lot of it, you know, was shot with a crew, but a lot of the stuff that you're going to see this season is literally my friend. You know, I have video guys that are part of the cast and my employees, and a lot of it's just them picking up the camera when something funny's happening. You know what I mean? And it's shaky camera and it's handheld and the lighting isn't great, but there's a lot of moments I feel like that are happening that don't make it to TV in a lot of these other, like, quote unquote reality shows. You know what I mean? There's really a lot of authentic, you know, raw stuff that goes into this, and I think the aesthetic and the feeling of it, how organic it is, really does, you know, if you're dialed into it, I really do think it subconsciously makes you feel like this is, like, you're in the room with us. You know what I mean? There's a docu-series feel to it. So, you know, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think there's a lot of things for people who are just, you don't have to necessarily be into the music industry or into that world at all. I just urge you to give it a chance, because there's a lot of funny stuff, and there's a lot of as much as it might be funny, there's a lot of the story that can, like, cross relate to anyone. You know what I mean? And relate across a lot of people and a lot of scopes. And I think I'm urging people, just the people that might kind of, you know, snicker and move past it as they see, you know, a show about a rapper they have no idea who it is. I just urge you to give it a chance, because it is it's not going to be what you expect. It's really, I'm really excited about the tone of the tone of the whole series and the direction that we took it. I really hope everyone kind of gives it a chance, because I think we caught something special at a special time. It's a unique time in my career. I think it's a very interesting time for a network to take a chance on an artist, to, you know, to follow an artist and dedicate a show to an artist that isn't mainstream by any means. You know, I'm not a household name by any means. So I really appreciate, you know, I really appreciate the network giving me the chance at this time. But I do think it creates a very interesting time for viewers to get involved and follow somebody on the trajectory before they make it. You know what I mean? Like, on this journey of this show, you're gonna follow, you know, and see if I make it. You know what I mean? And see how far we are able to take it. It almost feels like, you know, if you are a viewer, you kind of hopping on the bandwagon with us and seeing, you know, and seeing how far we could take this thing. And I think it's an interesting. I think all those things add up for very interesting. It's a very interesting time, and I think we're catching it at an interesting time.
Well, we are very excited, my man. Very excited. This is Mike Stud.